Hi everybody, I'm Blue Nagoon, and today I'm talking about some of my favorite albums and EPs that came out in 2022. As an independent artist that put out 2 albums myself this year, I know that the album format is kind of a passé thing. Like, most people are just going to find the couple songs they like, add them to a playlist, whatever, and I do that a lot too. But I do have an appreciation for albums, especially ones that can really hold my interest. Some of the albums on this list are very consistent like that. Some of them are just more like the half that I liked way outweighed the half that I didn't like. But in any case, these are just some of the albums that I found myself listening to a lot this year. All right, first up is Oakman's EP Sugar Coated Pill, or it's abbreviated SCP. This is just fantastic synth and guitar pop rock. Super punchy production, big gigantic drums and just hooks for days. Next up is Render Ghost's album. This is a special album. None of the 3 artists in the band had done synth pop before, and it really brings a freshness to the proceedings. It's also superbly crafted. Everything is in its place, and everything is built to support the melodies. Next up is Nightnight's album A Love Decayed. This is a compelling combination of dark synth, synth pop, industrial, and indie rock. It's a deep, dense album that rewards listening through it all the way through and rewards multiple listens as well. There's just lots of tension and slow burns and secrets to unlock. So one of my all-time favorite things in music is when an artist walks the line between taking their music seriously and respecting the craft and the power of song and all of that, but then at the exact same time acknowledging the absolute ridiculousness of it all. It's kind of my view on life in general, actually. The band that most represents this is probably The Darkness, but also Tenacious D, Symphonic Metal, or the 2 albums that are next on this list, the first one being Ghost. I've heard Ghost described as, Swedish pop meets metal, which is pretty apt, and also where do I sign up? I enjoyed their last album a ton, and this one even more. I've always felt like the Achilles heel of Ghost was the lead singer, just didn't quite have the power in his voice that I wished he did for this kind of music, but on this album he uses a lot of doubling and harmony and vocal arrangements to support it, and it works really well. I will say that on the song 20s, I feel like the band maybe pushes over the cheesy line just a little bit too far, even for me, but the vast majority of this album is just unadulterated rocking ear candy. Next up is Jnny Cobra's album The Luciferi, y'all. This album is such a good time. It combines the anything goes sample-based production of the early 2000s with demonic dark synth, but then the whole thing has a sense of humor, and I just love how unabashed it is throughout. Next up is Hanna Rua's EP Light Up Your Dark. This is an excellent synth pop EP. I especially like the last couple tracks that bring in some trip hop influences and some really creative production. Next up is Muna's self-titled album. I was of 2 minds about this album. The first few tracks really feel like the band is just trying so hard to make a giant pop song, and they end up feeling like blunt instruments. But as the album goes on, the songs get more subtle, and they come back to kind of the bittersweet synth and guitar pop rock that Muna does so well. Like I said in my review, the floor for what a Muna song is capable of is lower because of this album, but also the ceiling is still nowhere in sight. Next up is Carrellee's album Scale of Dreams. This one was a real grower for me toward the end of the year. It's synthy indie pop, lots of warm, cozy saturation, noise, and lo-fi effects. Carrellee's voice is just super versatile and expressive, and there's all kinds of cool choices she makes in her vocal performances throughout. Next up is the Third Entity's album The Keening Sessions. This one kind of blew my mind. It's art pop, synth pop, prog pop maybe. There's lots of big rock drum grooves and just incredibly original vocal arrangements. It's just really exhilarating, kind of bearing witness to a powerful artistic vision being realized. Love it or hate it, it's definitely worth checking out. Next up is Octogain and Kiki Tone's album Watch Out. This album throws back to pure 80s pop. If you took a time machine back to 1989 and popped in an album, this is what would come out. They nail the era artistically. You've got the DX7 tines, you got the mix of acoustic and electric drums, soft rock, background vocals, and kind of blue-eyed soul bits and pieces, hair metal guitars, just a fantastic mix of everything 80s. If you like retrowave of any kind, you've got to check this album out. Next up is Tears for Fears' The Tipping Point. I wasn't a huge fan of Tears for Fears' reunion album that came out in 2001 or something, but I really like this one. It feels relevant in a way that bands in their third, fourth, fifth decade or whatever don't always. I love the haunted shuffle of the title track. Long, Long Time is really pretty. I like what they did with the chorus there. Break the Man is great. The song I come back to the most is Rivers of Mercy, which is a ballad in the same vein of Woman in Chains. It's just great that these guys are still at it and putting out fantastic stuff. All right, that's my list. I would love to check out some of your favorite albums of 2022, so put them in the comments below. I also did a video counting down my favorite songs if you're interested in that. I also put 2 albums of my own out this year. One was a chill pop album with Alyssa Fischer called Crestfallen in February, and the other was a synth pop 80s rock album with 9 different lead singers called Here Be Dragons that came out in October. That one, amazingly, has made some best of 2022 lists, which just blows my mind. I would be honored if you checked either of those albums out, and thanks for the great music this year, everybody, and have a good 2023.